You are listening to another edition of POCC Block Reporter Radio with the Minister of Information, JR. Today we're going to be talking to political prisoner Mumia Jamal, who has been on Pennsylvania's death row for the last 28 years on a politically trumped-up murder conviction. The U.S. Supreme Court in January of 2010 sent Mumia's case back to an appeals court based in Philadelphia for further consideration in view of its recent decision in the Ohio case of a neo-Nazi murderer that the Supreme Court says raises similar issues. Now that the Spizak case has been determined, where are we in terms of your case?
Well, we're back before the Third Circuit Court of Appeals, which is the state's highest appellate court. We haven't heard when, but we will be going back before them, and the struggle continues, literally. Anyone who has ever read either the oral arguments of the Spizak case or the Spizak cases themselves, that is, the ones that went through the Sixth Circuit Court of Appeals in the federal system, will learn almost immediately that there are really serious differences between these two cases. So it's really rather absurd to think that these cases are related, but that will be part of the struggle, I assure you.
Have you noticed any trend in how the Obama administration has been dealing with death row cases?
Well, not in terms of the state, but of course the detainees who were held in Guantanamo clearly are at the forefront of the federal effort. Whenever they find a place to try these guys, they've virtually promised that they'll execute them. So that's going to be a big thing. I should say that one of the events that has not gotten a lot of reporting is the ALI. Most people don't know what it is. I've talked about it recently, but sparingly. It's called the American Law Institute. Don't be surprised if you've never heard of it. Most people have not. But it really is quite influential in many respects. The ALI, way back in the 70s, I believe, and perhaps before, they wrote the framework of what became the American death penalty system. These were the people, not the court. The ALI came up with aggravating circumstances, mitigating circumstances, separate jury, the whole nine. The court, in 1976, adopted their studies. These are the people who create what's called model penal codes. They create a national system, and states around the country, legislatures, take their studies and their work and implement it into legislation. About a month ago, they said essentially, given the state of capital punishment in the United States, that is, an elected judiciary, the many mistakes that have been found, political corruption, the failure to provide competent counsel, they're out of the business. They essentially resigned. Now, the ALI was about 4,000, I believe, judges, lawyers, prosecutors, you name it, law professors. These were distinguished lawyers who were the people who designed this system. They essentially said, it can't work, we're out of here. We're not going to deal with this anymore. So, that should be news, one would think, but I bet you haven't seen it on TV.
What can other media makers around the world specifically do to best support you?
Well, there is no shortage of stuff on my case from many sources. Some of it is, several years old, but it's still valuable. One of the least reported things was the Amnesty International report on my case. It's unprecedented for Amnesty to really get involved in individual cases. But their report says quite clearly that there's, they may not use this word, but it certainly will come to mind if you read it, that there's a Mumia rule, that what used to be called precedent does not apply in this case, that the courts will make one rule and then make another rule when it comes to my case, and then afterwards make another rule again. And they've done that repeatedly. But it's one thing if I say it. It's one thing if a supporter says it. I think it's something else if Amnesty International says it. These people won a Nobel Prize for their work. They know what they're talking about. So I guess it's available online. People can research it, read it, and come to their own conclusions.
I know that you've written commentaries about what has happened in Haiti.
Yes.
But specifically, what do you think about the earthquake in Haiti and the recovery effort, as well as the media that you're seeing about what's going on in Haiti?
Well, it isn't just my opinion. Several days ago, I saw one of the network newscasts, and they were covering the case of the Baptists who kidnapped or were transporting some 30-odd Haitian kids to the Dominican Republic, and then I think from there to America. And a guy in the background was saying, there are 1 million people starving around here, and the only thing on the news is about these, 15 white people from America. What is that about? He said what I was thinking, obviously. When I saw what was happening in Haiti, my first and then my second and my last impression was, this is Katrina, perhaps 100, maybe 1,000 times worse in terms of the loss of life. But it's Katrina without the water, almost literally. And it shows how, the richest country in the world and other rich countries.
This call is from the State Correctional Institution at Green and is subject to monitoring and recording.
And other countries all around the world are suddenly incompetent when it comes to feeding people or giving them water or building tents or, this is perhaps the greatest natural disaster in since Columbus, maybe. I don't know. I've never heard or read about an earthquake in the West on this scale. But, the response has been monstrously inadequate. And it seems to be getting worse when you think of infections and how people are not treated. People who survived the earthquake are dying of opportunistic infections and, lack of treatment and lack of food and water. Starving. It's crazy. It's crazy. If you looked at American TV, if you came from Mars and turned on an American TV station anytime between midnight and 7 in the morning, you would see thousands of infomercials about, frankly, fat people, losing weight and, tightening their buttocks and what have you and getting in shape. And then if you went to Haiti, it would be like you visited another world. Well, in many ways, it is another world, It's a world that has been at war continuously since their revolution and victory in 1804.
Right.
For nearly 60 years, the United States did not recognize them. They couldn't, because this was free black people in a country that believed that black people were only good for slavery.
Is there anything that you want our delegation to tell the people in Haiti coming straight from political prisoner Mumia Jamal?
That I love them, that I learned about them when I was very young, but I learned about them more when I read C.L.R. James' book, The Black Jacobins. That I love them, that I admire them, that they are an inspiration to every black, conscious, thinking soul on the planet. And I wish I could do far more for them. I think of them every day. They're beautiful, strong, resilient, wonderful people, and they deserve much, much better. They have deserved it since 1804, God knows, but they haven't received it. And it's time for a real positive change. I wish them every good thing from the bottom of my heart.
Last question. How do you continue to create such prolific work under this extreme pressure?
I could ask you the same thing, JR. There's so much to do, and so I think, frankly, so few voices. I mean, when you look at the corporate press and, how it's a sellout machine or a fear machine, then, there's work to be done. I mean, there's so many stories to tell. There's so many stories that remain untold.
You have 60 seconds remaining.
If you don't do it, if I don't do it, if Kilu doesn't do it, then it won't get done. So you have to do what you can do. I still think of the good work that, the early Eldridge did when he was Minister of Information of the Black Panther Party. I think that inspires you, doesn't it?
Yeah, definitely. And Panthers in general, no doubt.